If you were the king of the earth, or let's say king of America, which some would say you are, if you're the king of America, how would you have handled COVID from February 2020? Like, what would you have done? Because I feel like we all have, like, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that. I don't know what the better solution would have been, especially when you consider stuff like hospitals and quitting and deaths and triage, like wherein at one point Wuhan was going to build, they built that hospital in a week, which America just can't do, shit like that.
Right.
To me, it was always a hospital bed issue.
Well, in some ways. The problem, it's a health issue, right? And you're dealing with vast swaths of the population that have very fragile bodies, very fragile health.
People that are in bad health, naturally in bad health.
That's a lot of
have
people.
Never cared. I would say, what is it, 45% of Americans are obese?
Yeah, something like that, somewhere in the neighborhood. And, and that's just obesity. Then you have these people that maybe they're not obese, but they have terrible blood pressure and they eat terrible foods, their immune system's shot,
Diabetes,
There's a lot of fucked up people in this country. And that was what was exposed by COVID. No matter what anybody did, it was going to be bad for those people. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No matter what anybody did, that disease was going to wreck people with damaged immune systems. It was just, and especially overweight people.
A plurality of people, almost half, to say nothing of just old people.
Right.
I would argue there's more, let's go 60-40 unhealthy to healthy in America. You could almost go 70-30.
Yeah, I think you could go 70-30.
I mean, you go 80-20. I mean, you know what I mean? Depending on your definition.
You want to get really crazy. Yeah. Fit, then you're down to like 5%.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is nuts. Like, it's not that hard to work out. But the thing about COVID in that regard is that there's really no solution that made any sense. Like, when there was no vaccine, when the medications were confusing, it was hard to know what was real and what wasn't. Hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, and what about monoclonal antibodies and all these different things.
And it was always never clear what did what.
Yeah. It's very, very dangerous whenever you have a new disease, because you do have people trying these off-label medications, and some of them work and some of them don't. And then you have a lot of pressure from the companies that are producing vaccines, because they want a binary solution, because that's where all the cash is. And then you have the emergency use exemption, which the only way you get that emergency use exemption is if there is no treatment that's available that works. So if you are the person that's in charge and you stand to make untold billions of dollars from the vaccine, which they did, they suppress any information.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah. I'm wondering, with that playing field,
what do you do?
What does the king do?
You definitely don't shut the country down. You definitely don't. You give people the option.
Sometimes I think that, and then I look at 300,000 people quitting healthcare, and I'm like, that's an unforeseen consequence. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
well, how about the restaurants? How about the small businesses?
Yeah.
So much of the
suicide,
country.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Drug abuse and drug overdoses.
And that's from shutdowns.
From shutdowns.
So, and then you go, well, what if we don't shut it down?
Well, then you get Florida. Florida had deaths, but if you look at it, Florida, first of all, is very old. A lot of old people. Mm-hmm. And if you adjust by age, Florida did better than a lot of other states. What they did was say, we're going to protect our elderly, protect our vulnerable, and everything stays open. And everyone's like, you're crazy. Everyone's going to die. And it turns out, no. Turns out they were right. And the economy there didn't suffer. In fact, real estate went through the roof.
I mean, that was everywhere.
Yeah. Well, there in particular, because a lot of people moved there. I mean, their economy did well. Same thing with Texas. They didn't shut down. I mean, they shut down for a little bit, and then they were like, we're going to open up, and we're going to be cautious, and you should be careful of your own health. And if you're a person who's vulnerable, take care of yourself. Do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I guess it's just the downstream effects of that. That's.
You just can't shut the whole country down and expect that everything's going to be fine when you start it back up again. You disastrous results. And whenever the economy crashes like it did with that, you have all these other unforeseen side effects of that. And, a big one is people's mental health and anxiety. And, like, how's that going to affect the rest of their life? When someone works for 20, 30 years on a business, and you have a business and it's up and running and it's getting by and you're making a profit, and then all of a sudden the government comes along and says, you have to shut this business down. And maybe you've already had COVID. And maybe you were one of the lucky ones where it wasn't that big of a deal. And you got over it and you're like, okay, I got antibodies now. I'm not worried. And now the government tells you can't work. You cannot. It's against the law. If you do, you'll be arrested. It's madness. It's unprecedented. Never happened before.
I agree. I don't think it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened probably since the flu.
That was the problem. That was the problem was shutting things down and telling people what they can't do. And also having this like blanket solution for people, whether they're 80 and fat or whether they're 20 and fit, which is nuts.
Yeah.
Like you can't treat all bodies like they're exactly the same thing. That makes zero sense.
It's as a leader, you kind of have to, though, right? You know what I mean? You kind of have. It does have to be one size fits all, somewhat.
Yeah, but you don't have to impose restrictions. You could tell people that these are the best suggestions in terms of what we should do to preserve health. But the reality of respiratory viruses is you cannot contain them. They've never been contained. No one has ever successfully contained a respiratory virus. If people are allowed to walk, and they're allowed to talk, and they're allowed to eat, they're gonna fucking spread it. No matter what draconian rules they put down in Australia or in China, it fucking spreads. It burns through the people, and then, and a lot of virologists and people that are experts in respiratory diseases were saying this at the very beginning of the pandemic. They were saying, listen, this has got to burn through the population, and most people didn't want to accept that. They were like, no, there's got to be a better way. No, there's no better way. When you have a virus that spreads through people breathing on each other, it just burns through people.